All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us at COFMUG December 2016. Tonight our topic is discussing the recent FileMaker roadmap announcement, where they had a webinar presenting their roadmap pretty much for the first time in a more public manner. Previously, to get glimpses of what's in store for FileMaker, you've had to be an exclusive attendee at DevCon or part of the FBA program. So it actually says a lot to the direction of the company that they're now sharing this information publicly. And it corresponds nicely, I think, with the switch to the 12-month release cycle between versions of FileMaker and the 3-month iterations of updates in between. So that being said, to repeat a little bit of the disclaimer that's on FileMaker's page, the information that they provided is being shared for informational purposes only. It's not a binding commitment. They could still axe stuff out of the product line if something goes majorly wrong with it or if it's not ready. They're not going to rush stuff to market if it's not ready, but they do want to give people the opportunity to plan their business and plan their sort of FileMaker life around what's in store. So that being said, pretty much we will, I think, kick off with what's coming up next, according to them, which would be version 16 coming out in May of next year. And so we'll read stuff off here and then open it up to more of a group discussion as to each one of these. So we've got layout objects window, which will give you a list of all objects that are on a layout, sort of a folding tree of saying, like, this is your header, these are all the objects inside of your header, and if there's anything grouped together, this is what's inside of that group. Cards, which is something that might be familiar to iOS people, but it is a true modal window with no buttons around it. But also, so a card exists inside of the same window, and it doesn't use an open new window command like you would use for opening other windows in FileMaker. So it's essentially what it's doing is it's letting you load a separate layout inside of the layout that you're on.
Is it a layout object or a script? Or?
It's a layout from what I've seen. So essentially you're going to say new window, you're going to select a type of card and pick a layout for that. But the card is going to behave like it's still in the same window like a true modal window is, where you'll get the grayed out outline, the frame around it that shows your existing window behind it, but slightly grayed out. So like terms and conditions, pop-up windows, that kind of stuff.
Will you be able to position that now? Or does it kind of go to the same spot?
I think it'll always center itself in the window, but I think you're able to specify dimensions for it. So the Windows user interface update will finally support single document interface on Windows, which is a big deal. So essentially you have one application window instead of every new window you open opens up its own separate window. So Windows is finally catching up.
It's the opposite of what you just said.
Oh, right, yeah. The opposite of what Copy and pasting value lists in the manage value list dialog box for FileMaker. I was actually...
It's handy when you've got complex dynamic value lists.
Or if you're copying stuff from one file to another. Variables and
like the feature.
Variables in FileMaker data source references. So if you have a named reference to another FileMaker Pro file, you can use variables to choose that path at runtime. That's going to be huge for like data separation model stuff, where you can pretty much say, connect to this client's data file in a variable manner rather than having to hard code something into place. So that's actually that's a nice one. That's a big deal. Enhanced data viewer, supporting the autocomplete for function. So essentially, they're just dropping in the latest updates for the calculation dialog box that they've had out in other places now into the data viewer, which is a lot better than the old-fashioned one. And then finally, the running gag for so many years, they are finally patching in actually having full PDF support for both FileMaker WebDirect and FileMaker Server.
Yeah.
Which, when you think about WebDirect and Server in that context, it's kind of the same thing. So they're just finally adding it to Server. Finally running out of excuses. Finally don't have to use Finally don't have to use hacks and runarounds and stuff. It's just you're just going to be able to think about all the robots it's going to put out of business.
Yeah.
I know.
It's going to save a lot of money.
Save so much money on licensing or not having to.
So is that saying that the PDF creator will be embedded as part of it?
So you'll be able to use save as PDF, the script step, in a server scheduled script or a WebDirect script and have it work.
Yeah, will append work in that too? Append?
I'm assuming it's going to be the same script step, so append to PDF would work. With server, I think it'll work. I'm not sure it would work with WebDirect because of the sandboxing limitations of the browser.
Right.
So there's a few more that are, that was the development category. So these are the features that were geared towards developers developing solutions. We're going to skip the rest of the ones that are in the list in the interest of time, although there will be a link to this documentation whenever we post this recordings, and it was also in our meeting announcements, so you can read through this on your own and see the other things. But there are other categories of what they were going over in the roadmap was in development, which means that they're already working on it for future versions, so like 17 or whatever is down the road.
And Mike, you just went over the ones that are
Next.
in the category of next.
Yeah. The time frame.
Because they've also got it split into mobility and web,
Right.
and each of those has next.
Yeah, and under consideration has a roadmap for further down. So this is stuff like people have been constantly badgering FileMaker for, and they're listening and they're saying
we will certainly consider this.
But get how short if it's made it to this list, I've got a reasonable degree of confidence that they're actually eventually going to work it in, unless something else.
Somebody's going to spend some time writing some code. It doesn't mean it'll ever hit the actual software.
Right. But the one for this category specifically was the import interface, which is sorely in need of stuff. So in the mobility category, the stuff that's coming up next, animations and transitions, using script steps to provide a more seamless experience in navigating through the hierarchy of a custom app for FileMaker Go, such as switching to a new layout and that kind of stuff.
This is something where they did kind of a digression where they talked about they're using, later on during the question and answer, they're using more and more of the native platform APIs to build features in FileMaker. So this feature specifically is using segues and ways of navigating around the iOS app that aren't available on macOS or Windows, which is why it's a mobile feature only. But they made it really clear, they're looking for new ways to leverage the platforms that they're on, rather than trying to write all the code from scratch in FileMaker. So if there's a feature that you know that Windows does really well and you know how to do it in Windows, tell FileMaker, send them that when you request a feature. Here's how to do it, and here's the APIs for it. Because they'll be much more inclined to look into that.
That feature you just talked about, it's similar to a slideshow. The features you might have a slideshow.
It's kind of like one layout fades out and the new one fades in.
Flip, or you can slide.
I don't think they'll do slide or
I think
sliding
slide
specifically
right.
for. Well, maybe you'll be able to control it too, like with the go to layout script step, you'll be able to control the transition that it uses.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
There's
We'll see.
a list of I think about 10 different
Yeah, again.
transitions.
Flips one, swipe or wipe is one, dissolve is one. I think like
Ooh, did
and
they do
there's
the
different-
cube rotate?
I love that.
I don't think they did that one.
I don't
That's
think-
for what the desktops on Mac OS does that, right?
Yeah,
When you
when you
switch
switch
desktops.
You can do that with Snapchat.
Yeah. Yeah. So this one says script step, iBeacon script step, but I think it would probably be a trigger,
Well, it's like an on timer.
or is it an on timer
It
where it
says it's
listens for?
always looking.
Well, you,
Okay.
yeah.
It's a new script step that runs like on time. What
Okay.
you call it? It's running a thread.
Right. So basically, performing an action when an iOS device detects a predefined iBeacon or geofence, which is just a group of iBeacons. So essentially, like, you can manage your employees and see if they ever get too close to a McDonald's or Starbucks. And like, shoot them a message saying, "I'm automatically clocking you out.
Too close to the app.
Enjoy your coffee." They're too close to the App Store. Or enhanced signature capture. In addition to a full screen display, the signature capture screen is an overlay or embedded object in a layout. So essentially, just enhanced container objects for iOS, and then custom paper sizes for. Again, it's something that some people want, because I mean we've had a FileMaker Go system where it's dual use in the UK and the US, and
I just can't imagine having a device like this and saying, I wish this could make more paper.
yeah.
Well,
Luckily the rest of the world isn't exactly like
And Mike, on that
I would
one,
say.
on that next, I mean, if anybody's under construction.
So under consideration.
On that autocomplete, which is a real pain that doesn't do that, but that's fairly easy. If anybody ever needs to do that, that's fairly easy to do. You just hide a portal,
Yeah.
and you bring the portal up, and you do a
Right,
modified
but you need
script.
to make relationships and scripts and stuff,
Yeah.
and it would be
Right,
so
yeah.
much easier if you just had
But
it
that won't be here for another couple of years.
2 years,
Yeah.
maybe.
But if you need something like that,
Well, hopefully they have one of these every year, and the stuff that is actually next gets it in, and the stuff that's
That-
under consideration gets into development.
That would be fantastic.
Right. Perfect world, but as long as you guys keep buying FileMaker, then yeah. So yeah, for the under consideration stuff for mobility, view an app on the device.
basically, so there's some kind of, like being able to, when you're developing FileMaker, being able to run your app, FileMaker app on a mobile device, kind of like Xcode and ParaMaker.
Yeah.
But you can already do that if you have servers. I'm not really sure what they were getting at there. If that's just running locally or developing in
Which thing are you talking about?
View app on device.
View app on device was. Yeah, so it's probably more of a live thing. I mean, yeah, you can light up a server or go multi-user and then log in remotely, but that's just a simpler version of that. I mean, explaining how to do that to your citizen developer that they like to target is a much more complicated process, particularly if they're in an area that's got weird network controls and stuff. You might be able to do this.
I think that's important to grasp now. They're not targeting the citizen developer anymore. They made it pretty clear in the webinar that their target market is small business with 5 to 25 users, small work groups, and big organizations. They don't want the people like me, businesses like mine, are not a good fit for FileMaker because it's just me. I don't have anyone else. I'm not a good value proposition for FileMaker. I think that's good to hear. Like, this is where we're putting our effort.
I don't know that what you just described contradicts the citizen developer though, because a lot of the citizen developer was the person in the 5 to 20 person company who's doing their own development in-house.
Yeah.
The citizen developer wasn't you as a one-person company who's a developer. That wasn't what they were targeting then anyway.
But I think it was nice to hear that they've narrowed in specifically on their target market, and all of these features are presented to us with that in mind.
To back up what Joe's saying, FileMaker Pro Advanced is still a separate license from FLT.
Yeah.
So if you are buying a FileMaker licensing for teams, and you are the citizen developer on your team that wants a copy of Advanced, you need to purchase that license of Advanced separately. It's not included in your team license, which is perfectly fine. But I think they're
they're
saying
also-
the same thing, just with slightly different definitions of what that citizen developer means.
So would I qualify as a citizen developer?
I don't know. Do you make FileMaker for the company you work for?
No, I don't need a person.
Then no. You're a hobbyist developer. I'm not a citizen. Well, I guess I am because I've made two solutions. No, I've made 2 custom apps for my company in the last year.
Yeah, but you're a professional.
I want the citizen developer title and all the rights, privilege to
You don't get a comic trophy. You don't get another comic.
I think a citizen developer might be more someone who is not an experienced software developer that
Yeah,
can create, it's a,
but it usually colludes with that person that's doing stuff for the company they work for. It's just like even the advertising ads that FileMaker sends out with the user stories about like the guy that worked for the convention center in Texas or stuff. There was a guy that worked at the facility that made this thing because it made his life easy, and that's what they're advertising for. So, but
That's true.
all right. So integration. There's a few more. So we got a few more categories to go still. So integration is FileMaker and the outside world, and obviously the biggest change here is going to be the introduction of the FileMaker REST API that will allow you to interact with FileMaker using the same kind of language that the rest of the web has already been using for 6 years or more. But so essentially, if you want to do the REST API stuff already, you can go get an open source product called RESTfm, and I guessed really early on that this was coming.
When they open source there.
Yeah, because I was like, why would Goya make RESTfm, like this product that they were selling for $499, suddenly open source? Unless, and lo and behold, FileMaker adds it. So essentially, you can get that up now, and RESTfm just answers your inbound URL request and translates between custom web publishing to the REST interface. So that's going to be built into FileMaker now, and I'm sure that'll be an exciting enough topic that we'll do an entire meeting on it sometime later on. I know that there's going to be introductions to it at DevCon. So it's a big thing for them. It's basically like they're treating it as a way to replace some of the other outdated connections into the interface.
Yeah.
Because it opens up, honestly, like it opens up to a lot different platforms on the other end.
And they also said the REST API will obviously be on the Amazon Cloud thing, but the custom web publishing, CWP and XML will never make it to the Amazon Cloud thing. Just kind of the REST API. But the full version of FileMaker Server that we can all buy and install, that will have both the custom web publishing and the REST API.
This one was surprising to me only, but actually, now that I think about it, not surprising, but the Tableau web data connector for FileMaker. It's one of the few times FileMaker has actually gone and said, we are going to connect to this specific like third-party service.
Yeah. What was another instance of that?
Palm, FM Palm.
Take your report.
The Palm OS mobile version of FileMaker. I'm trying to think of. I think there used to be like a Lotus plugin that they gave you with the ODBC, JDBC stuff too, where like you could connect to FileMaker from Lotus.
I guess they do make like DSNs for you.
Well,
Yeah, about the closest
not really.
they get is those.
The JDBC and ODBC.
Yeah.
Yeah. but those are still generic. Those are open source or semi-open source based in terms of JDBC.
So this is a third-party paid solution.
Yeah.
Have you used
Yeah,
it?
paid
You said
I've used
For
it.
a lot of money.
We've got a couple clients that use
a
Tableau
lot of
in the
money.
wild.
Jesus.
What is it? What's the purpose?
Tableau is a reporting dashboard, so essentially you
Visualization.
Yeah.
connect to your data sources and you can just generate on-the-fly reports. What it essentially does is it makes a shadow cached copy of all of your data, so that you can do like multi-year aggregate comparisons.
It's a very nice interface.
Our company was,
You don't have to raise your hand.
You like
so
it?
you can speak.
oh, I'm sorry. Our company was using that for connecting and viewing big data.
Yeah, business
Yeah.
intelligence type.
But actually, I don't know why. Well, of course, probably because it's Microsoft. Microsoft competing with that, they're pushing their Power BI.
Well, Microsoft's they want people to use their Azure platform, and they've been advertising it. But what they don't tell you is that you have to write a lot of that yourself, and that's where they'll sign you up for it, sure, but you have to write your own SQL queries, where the other people have a little builder for you. Tableau usually the problem we've found with it is that it's exorbitantly expensive for what
Yes,
it
it
actually
is.
does.
It's
So
very
we actually
expensive.
use a couple alternative products. One's called Looker. That's like a third of the price. Does pretty much the same thing. But if you have the CEO types that just want to look at KPI dashboards, just to see how they're just to see a line of how their company is doing, then stuff like Tableau is a lot easier than spending hours and hours writing reports. And you can set up each user with their own dashboard so that they can make their own reports and modify. It's like the modern day Crystal reports is what I compare it to, where essentially you're connecting to any sort of data source. It's caching and aggregating that information. You make your own summary fields and divisors in their own programs to group things together and summarize it and count it and everything, and then put your dashboard together. But there is consulting work in that.
The Tableau looks, it looks nice
It
and
is.
easy, but it's pricey. I mean,
It
you're
is
right.
very pricey.
But it looked really
Well,
neat.
and I've heard compared to some
Like how
other
much
business
pricing?
intelligence, it's
Like
I'm not saying
500
it's
a month.
cheap, but it's
Yeah.
company?
reasonable compared to.
Well, I imagine if
Other-
you're making a lot of money, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. But it's not something like if you're just going to use it 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, no.
It's not.
I
It's
think
just
that,
not going to do it.
The Department of Education is working on we're
Oh.
using MicroStrategy right now for our business intelligence tool.
You start off just plugging the REST API into an RSS feed. You can just send that to update your code.
Maybe. Or build your own JavaScript dashboards in FileMaker,
Yeah.
and then start your own company and name it CodeSeed. Sorry.
So is Apple-
I was actually able to sell Dayback Calendar to somebody today specifically for the reason that it no longer required FileMaker as the UI to display it. So they are using Dayback Calendar to connect to FileMaker to get all of their calendar information into Dayback, and then they're just setting up a website to embed Dayback Calendar as the website. So they're basically shortcutting around having to build the website that loads the FileMaker data into a web calendar by just using Dayback. And it's great. It's perfect for that. So it is for a doctor's office where they're basically going to put up a board for the staff on a big screen smart TV that just has a home URL saved, and just loads the URL into the TV, loads the thing, and refreshes every 60 seconds or whatever. It's going to burn some images into that TV, but they seem happy about it. So this next one should have probably been up as part of the second one. JSON parsing goes hand in hand with REST APIs. So usually when you're generating stuff to send people through your REST API, you're putting it into a JSON format. But when you're consuming a REST API on your end, you're parsing that JSON format and getting the information out of it. So JSON supports multi-dimensional arrays of information, so you could send an entire FileMaker database worth of records in one giant JSON file, and it would essentially be like tables, and then records for each table, and then the fields for each record, all in one big, long, ugly array. Most REST APIs, though, will limit you on the number of results it returns because it has to put all of that together. So, like things like, what was the one I was just using the other day? Stripe's API will only let you return 100 results at a time. And you have to, there's a pagination parameter, so if you want more, you have to send more calls to get 101 through 199. So built-in options to do that's going to be good though, and if people are already using custom functions for JSON parsing, they'll easily be able to adapt to use the new ones. Enhanced curl options. So curl is what PHP and other languages use to basically communicate with outside forms and APIs to submit information and get information back. So if say you're using Stripe to process credit cards, when you actually make the charge to Stripe, you curl, so you post a form to that API endpoint and say, here's my information to charge that card. And you'll post it because you don't want to send it through get is the other half of that. And get, you essentially put all your parameters in the URL, but that's not secure. So you use post just like when you submit a web form, you use post. So curl allows you to do that kind of communication. Incidentally, base elements is almost exclusively run on curl for its interactive features. So for its SMTP email function is all written in curl, and it's got BE underscore curl underscore setups, so you can set options for curl and stuff. So it'll be actually really cool to see some of that worked in because it'll allow us to do a lot of that interaction with the outside world inside of FileMaker. External script steps. So this will be interesting, essentially.
So I want to coin the name for this feature as FileMaker viruses.
You mean aside from my 0-day FileMaker data scrambler script?
People could wreak havoc with this feature.
Well, considering how much havoc you can wreak on people's servers that leave the admin no password open, yeah. I had to explain that to a client one time that insisted that they didn't want to use usernames and passwords for everybody, and I was like, okay, well, how about we just use one username and password? He was like, well, that sounds like a pain, I don't want to do that. I was like, well, what if I told you I could write a script with 3 lines of code that would crash your server? And he's like, what? I was like, yes, loop, new record, end loop, set it as the on first window open script, and login. We'll crash that server. Probably crash your own computer too, but so perform script on server, loop. But essentially it'll keep making new records until you run out of memory, run out of processor power, or run out of disk space. Either one of those 3 is going to take that server offline. So don't let anybody ever tell you that setting a password that isn't the default admin no password for a file is not important, because I guarantee you it is.
I wish it was just part of the setup process when you hit a new file, it just popped up the dialogue
Well,
enter username, enter password.
They disallowed that with the cloud hosting now, which that's good.
That's good.
And
It's a start. And they require you to do encryption at rest with FileMaker Cloud
Yeah,
as
it
well.
just does it, but you don't have access to that though. So what do you do if you need to get it back?
Download the database.
No, that's not what it
I was under the impression that it wasn't.
it tells you to go encrypt. It doesn't do it.
I thought the key wasn't something that you had access to. I'll have to go back over that.
You select the key, but it gives you the opportunity to save it, I think. I forget too exactly what the process is.
What I thought it was, they just told you, you have to encrypt this file at rest, go use FileMaker Advanced to do that, and come back when you're done.
No, it does it for you because you can use
Right, I knew it
you
did
can
that
use
for you.
FLT and you can upload files without having FileMaker Pro Advanced. So
Yeah,
it's
that would be a
not,
conflict. wouldn't it?
yeah. Damn citizen developers.
I know.
And there are no license of FileMaker Pro Advanced.
We can make fun of them, but they're all going to be our customers eventually. They run into a wall.
Alright, so essentially the external script steps will allow developers that are already writing plugins to write script steps rather than just augmented functions for the calculation engine.
That's terrifying. Yes.
That'd be some really cool stuff.
But am I right in thinking that it's limited to the iOS app SDK to begin with, or is it going to be for everything?
No, like a good example would be like a dialogue. Instead of a dialogue for text, have a little progress bar. Like Base Element already has one that they wrote. And it takes a function to launch it, and now they can just build it right as a script. So launch progress bar, give it a
Oh, I
timer
see.
Yeah.
while your script is running. Things like that. You can see some cool stuff.
And then the big one in terms of security for the next integration will be OAuth support for accounts, essentially allowing you to authenticate FileMaker users via third-party OAuth providers like Facebook or Twitter.
Google.
How about Yahoo?
Just those three.
Initially, they did say they plan on
Right. But OAuth
Widening.
is...
What about Yahoo?
That's a billion.
I know, that's why I mentioned it.
And it was
I was
from 2013. It's like,
Yeah.
oh wow, we just now noticed this.
But what I can't
I guess
believe,
we should
don't know
tell
how
what
it
I,
happened.
what I can't believe is from 2013, but they in the news they made a big deal out of well, you guys now need to go and change your passwords now.
Yeah.
Hurry up and do it. And it was 2 years ago.
Yeah,
The damage is already done.
that's okay.
And wasn't it supposed to also be a state sponsor? That was the other attack for half a million.
No, that was getting Trump elected.
Yeah. I'm still amazed that Yahoo had a billion users. I
They
can't.
don't.
That's a third of the world.
Yeah, no, those are all spam accounts that got their information. 3 billion Yahoo email accounts that are only sending out spam.
Well, I was reading Credit Security, and there's other companies like AT&T and so on that use Yahoo to create their accounts and manage
Yeah.
their accounts. So,
Sure,
um,
Yahoo for business.
That's the label.
Not a secure business, but it's a business.
yeah.
Speaking of security, the next group of categories in our under consideration. We really need to use under consideration and not under construction. It's different. For integration is improved email functionality, which supporting
HTML.
multiple attachments in HTML emails. I mean, since I've already been doing that with like base elements, like
Right.
whatever.
But there's been some major email issues the last couple of versions. that have turned
Yeah.
us to-
Yeah. Yes, there have. Which is why we stopped using it altogether. What's that mail script step? And then extending the FileMaker data API to add support for scripts and containers as well. So the next category is security. And the sentence actually for this was actually really funny, so I don't want to, because they use the word proliferation, so I don't want to read this. Due to the proliferation of data breaches around the world, more and more businesses are making data security a top priority in their organizations. As a result, security has become a core consideration for the design and deployment of the FileMaker platform. This is already true based on most of the significant updates in the last like 2 or 3 versions of FileMaker Server, so it's just continuing that trend. So they say for next release, it's clicking a security lock icon to get details about the security of a network connection, SSL certificate info, validity, etc. within the FileMaker UI. So essentially they're taking what you can already get through your browser with FileMaker WebDirects and putting it into FileMaker Pro, and, well, assuming Go as well.
I call this adding support calls. What does this mean?
But I'm assuming that they're going to work in the ability for you to also check that if you've got a separate like UI and data.
Yeah, I was going to ask you why.
So that you can.
Why is that helpful? From a standpoint of, I mean, I can see you going in
User
if you're
trust,
using a web
probably.
or something like that, but unless, like you just said,
HIPAA
you can
compliance
check- Okay.
for mobile devices.
Like Joe said, it's just
mean,
more
TCI
support
compliance.
costs.
It's becoming a standard UI element. If you look in the browser there, it's, you know, you always
Yeah.
have your green
It's in
little
my
block.
browser. What is FileMaker? Your connection is private. 33 cookies from this site. Nice.
Yeah, how private is that?
Well, probably private.
The next feature is really cool.
Alright, so getting into the new kid on the block, FileMaker Cloud. Well,
You skipped them.
sorry, I skipped the under considerations for security.
Yeah, that,
Field level text encryption to encrypt text in a field is encryption. So that would be cool. And then AES 128 GCM level encryption, which is actually a higher level encryption than AES 256.
Oh, really? I didn't-
Well, they started over again because they're like, well, 256 and 512 are like super secure, so we're gonna start again with the GCM format and go
Hey.
start with 128.
So could you explain a minute, field level type,
field level encryption.
So that
Text
just means like you can have one of the fields in your database as being encrypted as the field level. So if you didn't want to encrypt the whole table, that means like anytime it displays on somebody's screen or gets saved back, it gets unencrypted or decrypted and then re-encrypted as it's coming into the FileMaker interface.
okay, so you
But
can
if
keep,
somebody steals the file, like for example, if you encrypt social security numbers,
I think it would have to be like you have to have a
but
password.
somebody
So if
steals
you've
the
got a
file,
social
that
security
can
field,
they can't,
only people with
reverse
the
it.
key can use the security.
Possibly.
At
Where
least
you put that?
you can't see it.
But you can also do that with encryption at rest for your on the entire file level,
Right.
where it'll be impossible to decrypt anything with that file if you don't have the key. So if you're worried about security at all,
But what
we've already been recommended to use encryption at rest.
field level is going to, you have a bunch of data that you don't need encrypted. It's, I mean, it's going to be encrypted response time. instead
Yeah.
of encrypting the whole
Possibly.
file or the whole table.
Or if you want to give your users an extra level of security, like if you're using an accounts module or something, or if you're storing passwords. Like we have a client that their requirements for their password policy for their FileMaker file requires that we check their previously used passwords. So we have to store their passwords when they expire. So we only store the expired ones, we don't store their current ones, but they're AES 256 encrypted in their database, and they get decrypted.
Right, but
And that's the way to do it? Because usually, I mean, the more typical way is to store the hash of each of those passwords. And then when you get a
Well,
new
we're
password,
storing the encrypted hash.
you don't need to store the encrypted hash. You just need to store the hash because you can't recreate the password from the hash. Because the hash is fixed length and by design.
No, AES 256 hashes are not the same. They are different each time you generate the hash.
Using a different salt each time.
They're not salted. It's just key-based.
Sorry.
I don't know specifically, I just know that when you encrypt something into AES 256 and then you encrypt it again, both of those two encrypted strings are different. They're not the same.
Okay.
Did you undo them?
Alright. Moving on.
Sorry.
FileMaker Cloud. And actually, I think we'll just pretty much get through this list.
yeah, okay, before you get into this, that stuff for what you showed us, last month on the
Yeah.
cloud, and it's only affecting what they want to do with
The FileMaker Cloud product. So this affects their Linux cloud version that runs on Amazon's EC2 cloud.
And they did say that they're treating the cloud as kind of a separate product than the rest of the platform, so they may roll features out to cloud before, like off-cycle releases. So cloud
Well,
may get,
FileMaker Cloud itself was released off-cycle.
Excuse me. They may get like REST API improvements before you see it come, things like that.
Okay.
Kind of cool.
So, blah blah blah. We want to make this attractive to new customers, so they'll continue to invest best quality experience. Yes, yes, yes. Point-in-time backup recovery. So, basically, as you take rolling backups throughout the day or snapshot backups throughout the day, you'll be able to restore to any of those points in time.
Sorry, does anyone need refills?
I will take one more, please.
Another Pepsi. You want me to just top that one off?
Yes, please. Essentially, like, you can have Bob says he accidentally ran the delete all or replace everything command at like 3:50 on Friday, and you'll be able to roll back to like 2:50 p.m. on Friday.
Well, this is also handy because currently in cloud you can't really get those kinds of regular backups. You have to get a whole snapshot in the store to get that. Now you'll be able to just go get that file and get data from having it stored on the snapshot.
It'll be awesome.
Just the same thing you can do on the server,
EMA, IA, AWS region support. So basically rolling this the FileMaker Cloud platform out to the marketplaces for Ireland and Frankfurt as well, to allow the European customers to do it. That's not stopping them. They're still using the American East data centers right now. I can't imagine it's fast, but they were already using like our shared hosting providers too that were in like Atlanta or North Virginia. So, and then also support for the Asia Pacific region in Japan, which Japan is one of their. I think it's either tied with South America or larger than South America. I think it's North America, Europe, and then it's either Japan or South America, and then Asia is the next growing. The general Asia area is growing. It's growing really fast in India too.
Really?
Yeah.
I would expect that. With basically that. Well, very briefly, but basically, India has been the source of, quote, offshore for a lot of companies. And so, therefore, everybody and his sister in India is learning to do programming, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, and they've been learning FileMaker for a while now.
Yeah,
just go roll through the forums every now and then.
Yeah. I get phone calls every now and then from India.
Nice. Yeah, I get people offer me, and half of the time I'm tempted, like, man, like, if my quality of work wasn't super high already, like, I would try to do the thing where I hired one of them for like $30,000 a year and made like what I make in a year and just pocket the difference and then not work. But like, because some guy did it. There was like a famous story about a web developer that did it.
Tim Ferriss did it.
I don't know if it was. Yeah.
But he didn't do it with development. He just did it with his whole job. It was like some executive. He just outsourced his job to like 400 people.
There was like a desk jockey programmer that worked for this company though, and he went into work every day and just played video games on his computer for like 8 hours a day and had some guy in India doing his job.
And that's what he was doing. And the company only noticed because he'd actually gotten an extra copy of his key to get into the LAN and sent it to India. And so they were getting 2 connections from him every day, one inside the building and one outside the building, every single day, and it eventually popped up on a report somewhere. And they went, huh, and yeah, it'd been 9 months, a year and a half, something like that.
But he openly admitted it too.
Oh, yeah. Was it good work?
Well, he got his work done. He's like, I don't see what the problem is. I'm getting the work done that you're paying me to do.
He just managed it.
Actually, did that happen too? Didn't he get promoted to like running his own division?
No, he got his ass fired.
Maybe that's an alternate story.
No. When you're asked to do that and you succeed, that's a promotion. When you fraudulently do it, they get rid of you as quickly as humanly possible.
So now for the most standard of standard FileMaker answers for the cloud category, under consideration, continue investment in FileMaker Cloud. Add functionality, capabilities, and integration with other cloud-based services.
To increase.
Well, I'm glad they're considering doing that.
Yes.
I'm considering that as well.
Yes. I am also considering doing something in the future.
So if they're running the FileMaker Cloud on Linux boxes, does that mean that we might-
CentOS specifically. But no, they have no plans to release FileMaker Server because it's a completely different product and it's designed as a cloud service.
Yeah, they're not going to give us.
They don't want
So no, I don't think there's any plans ever to bring back the Linux standalone copy.
They explicitly stated, we are not releasing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
That may change in the
thought I'd
future,
ask.
but as of today, they explicitly stated
Was it like-
it wasn't inferred.
It's not.
It was
it's
when
not
it-
under
Like how
No, it
explicit?
isn't.
Like F-bomb explicit?
Yeah, but otherwise they get a lot of people
No, we're not.
competition against them.
All right.
Well, I was thinking if I
And
moved to Linux off of Apple, then I could still use FileMaker.
our last
You in that camp right now?
I've been considering that. Probably, as I was
You
telling
can do
you,
it on
the
Windows.
next computer.
Okay, well, you can run an emulator inside of Linux then. Run Windows.
My boss just bought the PC you bought, the new one, so he can run Linux on it.
Uh-huh.
I use Wineballer to run like FileMaker Pro on my Mac, the
Well,
Windows
I understand
version.
but what I'm saying is if I wanted to legitimately get some other computer besides something made by Apple,
Right.
so I have current technology,
Yeah.
and then run Linux on it and run everything, I can do most of what I want to do.
Except you have to get Windows.
No. I mean, if I want to run the Office suite, then I can use LibreOffice, okay? If I want to run Python or anything like that, I can run that on Linux just as easily as I can anywhere else.
Yeah.
So that's just a consideration. Okay?
This is the year of Linux and Java.
I won't speak to FileMaker, but I
I've
think
only said that for the last decade.
I think the conundrum lies with how many different versions of Linux there are.
Uh-huh.
With what the feature set of FileMaker Server entails. Like, to release FileMaker Server, the product, for any platform other than Windows and Mac that they've developed it for, you have to think of like what it does, all of the stuff it does in terms of encryption and security, like the networking protocols, the APIs, that kind of stuff. And then
And the more features they add to it,
the harder it gets to translate it. So I think from a technical perspective, that's probably the excuse that any engineer is going to give you, is that it's just impractical for us to pursue Linux because it's open source and there's so many things. Which is why people have given the excuse where like they don't want to support PCs because like your hardware can be one of 18 billion configurations.
I think the big issue is they got bit last time. They had a bunch of people going, oh, please release it for Linux, please release it for Linux, and then they sold like 4 copies. And they're like, okay, so the demand is there, just nobody's actually going to purchase it. And so, you know, because nobody really buys software on Linux. Aside from the people who do, but most of those people aren't usually running FileMaker.
Or they're buying specifically the version of Linux to run on an enterprise level like Red Hat or
I mean, supporting it would definitely be problematic, but I think the big issue is just
Wine
that
is the Mac OS to run Windows.
Right. But is there a Linux?
Probably.
Yeah, so you can
Like
Probably
in 2006, I was running Linux, and
No, I mean, because
No,
I've got a virtual machine of Linux, but I was thinking if
Yeah.
that was the main
talking
thing,
about
you could
emulating?
find something that does the Wine type. It's like crossover Mac. to
Possibly. Wine is for running Windows on Mac.
Without Windows.
Without Windows
When
installed.
I would buy a copy.
And you can, there's a secondary program you can install called Wineballer that'll actually make it into a package that you can like put in your dock and then launch it, and it launches your Windows app. I actually use it for the program to crack FileMaker because it's only for PC,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that's what crossover is. All
and it's
about.
also very useful. And it doesn't work on encrypted at rest files.
Good.
That was the first thing I tested when the encryption errors came out. And now we actually will print out. No, I don't think we print out. I forget how it's delivered. I think we have a secure, like a DocuSign thing where we'll put people's encryption key in DocuSign and make them sign for it and take care of it for their own database, so that if it ever gets lost, we can be like,
Yeah.
I have this backup from 8 years ago when we deployed. Would you like us to use that? All right, so last group here, and we're looking pretty good on time still. Performance and scalability, so the things that make FileMaker work better. There's only one next thing in here, and which is in FileMaker WebDirect scalability, basically improving the client capacity using multiple FileMaker WebDirect worker machines. Did you gather what this meant? Because
It's the return of the rake.
It's more multi-machine deployment, it's more web direct connections. We're trying to ramp it up to a couple hundred.
So just having the more support capacity for larger groups of WebDirect users.
So if you're in the enterprise and you've got say, 500 or 600 web direct users in your 50,000 people company, they should be able to just spin off more VMs on the network.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hard feature.
So each individual WebDirect client is not going to be as resource intensive on the servers. Another way of saying
That, but they're also it reads like they're adding more work machines. Like you boy found like the server
Right. Basically, more web publishing engines running throughout your
Okay.
network that act as the middleware between your FileMaker server database and the
But those
WebDirect.
are
But right now, in order to do that, you pretty much have to do replication of your data somehow.
You have to sync your data server to server,
Yeah,
which becomes a huge
different servers to be able to serve to multiple people. Back in 4, FileMaker supported rakes, redundant arrays of inexpensive computers, and so you would have one data storage machine,
Right.
and then multiple web serving machines.
They're all pointed to the same.
And they're all using the same. So your primary data server will probably not have any WebDirect capacity itself. It will be farming all of that out to other machines unless you go for a unified that's not going to have that.
Right.
And to be
My
fair,
guess.
like traditionally large web applications work very much
So
the
it's the
same
same way. That's what I was thinking.
They're, single or paired database servers on the back end, web servers serving in between, and a load balancer that runs to determine which server you get connected to host your web connection based on what's available. So that load balancer would be a server that just monitors how many people are actively connected to each server,
Right.
and says, okay, this server has 100 people, this server has 5, so I'm going to connect you to the one that has 5. AWS has a lot of that load balancing built into the cloud, so you can actually spool up multiple, like, if you want to do a really quick test of it, you can spool up a bunch of their free, like, T1 micro machines and, like, spin up one load balancer, and then, like, connect 5 people, and each of the 5 people you'll see will connect to a different instance. It's pretty cool how it works, and actually I've been looking into it a lot because I've been looking into architecting large WAN SaaS solutions recently for web-based applications for hundreds of thousands of, hopefully millions of users.
Mike, do you happen to know if this will require sticky connections or not?
I'm not sure. I'd imagine it would still just use WebSockets if it's WebDirect based. So, no, I don't think so.
So wait, when you're saying SaaS, you're saying software as a service? Well, versus SaaS, the
company.
company that
Yes.
does.
Yeah, it's,
We have a SaaS installation
okay,
at
sorry.
work, so that's why
Sorry
I'm
to
like,
confuse you.
okay, which one is he talking about?
That's ass.
Capital S, lowercase a is capital S.
Yeah.
SaaS.
Like ball.
The 3 under consideration for here are just stuff that they were probably kicking around the office as to what they can do to make WebDirect faster. And actually, the guy that owns WebDirect, Finn Nadala, is actually very good about that. He's the guy that brought on the change between 13 when they were using long polling to 14 when they were using WebSockets that net them like the 25% performance gain in one go. They're like, well, essentially we can just do this and it'll be 25% faster.
The long polling is so cool to describe.
So it's apples to SSDs and these guys.
There you go. So multi-thread sorting, basically getting more power on multi-core machines to be able to process multiple sorts at the same time on FileMaker server.
That's pretty cool.
Yep. Smart server-side sorting, automatically sorting of data on a FileMaker client or on a FileMaker server based on the CPU usage algorithm. So basically saying, which one of you guys is going to be able to sort this record set faster, and then passing the work to that person.
Yeah, so it's a dynamic thing as opposed to being coded.
WebDirect already does this. But,
WebDirect always does it on the server side.
Yeah. What you didn't even get on Pro, like it's on the sorting down on the server.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Gee, I'm connecting with a Xeon processor. You want to do it here?
And well, they've already started rolling snips of it into FileMaker because the way the portals work, like when you scroll through records, and it's like, so the way it's like caching list views now, where it's like caching like the first 100 or so results, and like it's not going to pull up the rest. So if you click and hold down a scroll bar and scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see the number of records pop up at the top, and it'll be like a ghost list view. And then when you drop the scroll bar, it'll then load that smaller set of records. So that type of performance is stuff where they're kind of just fine-tuning how it works because that's how it should work. And then continue. The second most FileMaker responses in this list. Continue FileMaker WebDirect improvements. Scale the use and performance of FileMaker WebDirect. Under consideration. Well, since improved client capacity is next, I'm going to say that's part of that still. So, so to kind of go through the wrap up of the final parts of this list, that's their actual like roadmap list. I would encourage highly to watch the webinar because there's some more in-depth discussion. I'm giving kind of second-tier information because I never actually watched the webinar. I've been picking this up from FileMaker
Really?
over the past like year or so.
They'll show you actual examples in the webinar.
Yeah.
They showed slides on it.
Yeah. But it's still it's stuff that when they say next, it's stuff that's probably
the question and answer was a big part of the webinar. The answer to the webinar was a big question.
Yeah.
So
They
you got
didn't.
the webinar on one side and his.
I saw our January meeting. We could do the Q&A from this. Just that much.
Okay, I'm hurt that they're dropping Mac Paint support.
I know.
What's up with that?
I'm gonna move to another platform.
So
there are
next
FileMaker systems that are going to break, just so you know.
deprecated feature is being removed from FileMaker next. And it's funny because they've deprecated runtimes and people were ready to stink about it, and then they were just like, we're just going to leave it and not say anything. For now.
They said last year they were going to leave it in the next version. Now they're saying again they're going to leave it in the next version.
Right.
But they're sick of, you can hear in their voice, they're sick of maintaining that now.
I would be too.
Okay, so
It's a feature they don't make any money on. They're not really selling that many more copies of FileMaker Pro Advantage to get it, so why bother like furthering it or maintaining it?
so what are they talking about? External.
The external function, because they're going to allow plugin developers to write their own script steps.
So there's a function called external that just plugs into.
Function of the day for next month.
Because you can't really use it unless you C program.
Mac Paint support. various themes. So I wonder if they're finally getting rid of retro. The neon lights of FileMaker.
They deprecated a bunch of themes like 2 or 3 release notes ago. Like all of the stuff that came out of Final 12, pretty much all of that was deprecated.
Cool.
Well, hopefully they come out with some new ones because I'm getting sick of using sophisticated.
I don't think they want to. I think their position was, we don't want to design these.
That's a you problem.
Here's all the tools, you guys do it.
Which to me is fine if they have just.
Well, if you could install a
blank one,
The
theme,
minimalist one.
Yeah, the minimalist.
if you could install a theme by script step, then it would make a lot more sense.
That would be awesome.
Because right now, like, if you want to put a theme on somebody's computer, you have to go into like applications, FileMaker Pro, right-click, show package contents, go to like content, resources, themes, and then paste a theme folder in there. You can make your own custom theme and put it into FileMaker that way.
That's not how you're supposed to be doing this.
Well,
You
it's
can just go to FileMaker, manage themes, and import for one file into another.
yeah.
You still have.
The way you're doing
But what if you make a new file and you don't have access to any of those other files, but you still want to get that theme?
You should have thought about it, I guess. I've been in that position.
You should have planned better.
There you go.
That's under consideration.
It's a real world scenario. And if they want people to write themes, then they should have something like that. Because if I'm writing my own theme, I'm not doing it in FileMaker. I'm going to write it in Sublime with my own CSS, and then import it into FileMaker some other way. But I can't do that now unless I copy the folder and paste it in.
Isn't this the only place that themes was really mentioned
Yeah.
in the thing? Okay, so
Right. Support for resource forks for files that are inserted into container.
I don't understand what that means.
I don't know.
Like me.
Resource forks were a part of the Mac OS or OS
Actually, it
for
was part of,
way back when.
System 9, System 8,
Okay.
where you had a data fork and a resource fork for every
Yeah, I
file.
remember.
And
Okay.
didn't resource forks have like icons and
icons,
Yeah, it had all of the
thumbnails.
stuff about what the programming side of things.
So essentially
Code
bringing
was in
containers up to a
resource
modern
forks.
standard.
that's kind of along with the Mac Paint support. Would be my guess.
And here are the runtimes were deprecated in FileMaker 14. However, they will not be
Actually-
removed in FileMaker Next.
You're probably right. but that's
FileMaker
what caused the Mac
wait. FileMaker
Paint support to
16
drop,
is officially
because
called FileMaker
I'm pretty
Next.
sure MacPaint was storing all the
Yeah.
graphics in the resource.
Or split.
Except on the
Well, I think they're the
slideshow,
same age,
when
so
they
to speak, the thing from
showed
the-
FileMaker Server,
But
it said FileMaker Server 16.
They're actually really calling it FileMaker.
actually, those get resource forks.
No.
No, no,
There's
on
way
They call it the
free.
new file.
Oh yeah, the first Macs had
It's like Pepsi Next.
Are they going to bring back FileMaker Classic?
Actually, those technically resource forks probably predate MacPaint.
but I want to know is how they're going to draw that folder. You know, is it purple on?
So,
Pink.
supported,
We're just going down the
operating
rainbow
systems.
now.
Blue.
Oh, is it blue?
Yeah, because we're getting into Indigo now.
Ah, okay.
Well, there's a lot of blue branding.
I didn't know you could get El Capitan.
Probably so. I hadn't thought about that.
You mean in 32-bit? I didn't know you could get 32-bit for El Capitan now either.
No, you might be able to. Weren't there some old 30-bit machines?
But I mean, the big addition here is they're finally going to support Windows Server 2016 Standard Edition.
But they're not, they're dropping.
2008. Wow. Thank God.
How is it good server?
Yeah, which is why it's lasted for 8 years and now needs to be replaced.
Fair enough.
Well, we had.
But I know my other
FileMaker Go, iOS 10, and iOS 11 when it becomes available. Foreshadowing.
Okay, go back, scroll out just a little bit. No, the Windows 10, what are they talking about?
For server, Windows 10
No,
for development.
But why
and
would
testing.
you want to run?
Because they're assuming the machine you're running that on isn't going to be powerful enough, or not all the features are going to work for.
So if
production.
I was Joe and I wanted to,
Like,
Yeah, I mean-
on my Mac at home, I run FileMaker server for my development environment.
right,
So the
same thing for Windows 10.
Well, it might be specific to the license that they give you for testing and evaluation purposes as well, possibly.
No, they always have that disclaimer in there for the desktop version.
Yeah. They don't want you
It
using
totally works.
that
You
as-
couldn't serve files like this for deployment.
Yeah, because Java update's gonna JUschedule.exe is gonna pop up and like everybody's going to get disconnected. WebDirect, Safari 10X, Internet Explorer 11X, Microsoft Internet Explorer Edge 25, and Chrome 51.
Is Safari 10 0 or is that okay?
No, 10 is out for LCAP 22. Product availability, end of life for FileMaker 13 is September 22nd, 2017.
Is that when you're gonna
And
release
FileMaker
the
12 is already past its end of life. So here's some we'll use that in FileMaker Go 13 already past end of life.
Maybe removed earlier from the App Store.
Yeah.
As of Tuesday, all of my customers and all of my servers are on FileMaker 15.
And that is the end of the list. Anybody have anything else to add before we stop the recording? Okay. Well, thank you for coming to COFMUG, and that is the end of our discussion. Please visit our website at COFMUG.com to get the links to this webinar and the documentation that we were reviewing during this meeting. Thank you very much.